She was standing at the altar in a wedding dress worth more than most people's homes. 300 of the most dangerous people in America were watching. And then, her groom looked her in the eyes and told everyone he refused to marry her. Not because she did something wrong, not because there was someone else, but because loving her terrified him more than any enemy ever could. Chiara Benedetto was humiliated in front of every powerful family in the Cosa Nostra. Her reputation was destroyed. Her future was erased in a single sentence. But what Giovanni Caccini didn't realize was that the woman he rejected would become the one person he couldn't survive without. And when a deadly betrayal put her life in danger, he would do anything, anything, to get her back. Even marry the woman he swore he didn't want. This story is a powerful reminder that love is never a weakness. It takes more courage to open your heart than to build walls around it. And sometimes, the person who hurts you the most is the one fighting the hardest against their own fear of losing you. If that gave you chills, you are going to want to stay until the very end, because this story only gets more intense. Hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what happens next, and drop a comment telling me, would you have given Giovanni a second chance? Now, let us begin. The heavy scent of orange blossoms mixed with expensive perfume filled the church, making my stomach churn. I was standing in the bridal suite, my hands shaking while Maria, my mother's dearest friend, adjusted a veil passed down through 3 generations of our family. The Venetian lace felt cold, like a burial shroud against my skin. Bellissima, Maria murmured, her old hands resting gently on my shoulders. Giovanni Caccini is a fortunate man. Fortunate? The word was poison on my tongue. I was 22 years old, trapped in a wedding gown that cost more than a family home, about to marry a man who filled me with equal parts terror and fascination. Giovanni Caccini, at 37, was the head of the Chicago branch of the Cosa Nostra. His name alone could make powerful men tremble, and he was moments away from becoming my husband. I could hear the low hum of voices from the cathedral beyond the closed door. Every significant family in the organization had gathered. The Morettis came from New York, the Russos from Boston, and the Salvatores traveled from Detroit. This was far more than a wedding. It was a declaration of power, a strategic maneuver to merge the strength of the Benedetto and Caccini families. I was the living symbol of that promise, the beautiful offering bound by white silk and family obligation. My own reflection stared back at me from a tall mirror. The dress was a masterpiece, custom designed in Milan. Its fitted bodice highlighted curves I had been taught to conceal, and the long, flowing skirt made me resemble a character from a dark fairy tale. My dark hair was sculpted into an intricate updo, with the veil pouring down my back like a lacy waterfall. Diamond earrings, a present from Giovanni, sparkled near my face. I appeared to be a bride. I felt like a lamb for the slaughter. The door swung open and my father stepped inside, looking regal in his tuxedo. Dante Benedetto was a striking man. Even at 55, with hints of silver in his dark hair, he had an authority that commanded a room without a single word. But the look on his face sent a chill straight through me. Something was terribly wrong. "Papa?" My voice sounded weak, like a little girl's. He shut the door behind him with a slow, deliberate motion. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Maria saw his expression, immediately made her excuses, and vanished, leaving the two of us alone. "Chiara." My father's voice was tight with tension. "Sit down." I refused to move. Fear was turning to ice in my veins. "I don't want to sit down. What happened? Is it Giovanni?" "Giovanni is fine," he said, his words sharp and clipped. "Physically, anyway." I clutched my stomach where a nervous energy had been fluttering all morning. "Then what is it?" He finally said it. "He has called it off." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I grabbed the back of a nearby chair to keep from falling. "What?" "The wedding." My father's jaw was clenched, his rage barely contained. Giovanni Caccini has informed us he will not be marrying you. The words felt unreal. They could not possibly be true. But everyone is here. The church is filled. The reception is... I am aware of where everyone is, Chiara. My father's voice snapped like a whip. Giovanni made his decision public 10 minutes ago. He stood at the altar and informed the priest, the families, and God himself that he would not be taking you as his wife. A crushing wave of humiliation washed over me, stealing my breath. I couldn't think. I couldn't understand what he was telling me. Why? The question was a faint whisper. He gave no reason, my father said, turning to stare out the window, his posture stiff. He just announced he had made an error, that the wedding would not happen, that he refuses to be tied to a woman he does not desire. Does not desire. The phrase felt like a physical blow digging into my heart. I had spent months getting ready for this day, months coming to terms with my fate. I had accepted marrying a man 15 years older than me, a man who had built a reputation on violence. I had told myself I could do this, that I could be the kind of wife he required, that we might one day find something real between us. And he simply did not want me. The families are in an uproar, my father said, his voice like stone. The Morettis are yelling for answers. The Russos are questioning Giovanni's judgment. The Salvatores are already plotting what this breakdown means for their own deals. He finally turned to look at me, and I saw an emotion I had never seen in his eyes before. It was pity. You know what this does to you, do you not? I knew exactly. In my world, a bride left at the altar was worthless. It made no difference that I was innocent. The gossip would be relentless. Did she do something to offend him? Is there a defect in her? Perhaps she is not chaste. Those whispers would haunt me, ruining any hope for a decent future marriage. My life was over. I want to see him. The words came out of me, surprising me as much as my father. Chiara, I need to see Giovanni. My voice was gaining strength, powered by a fury I never knew I had. If he is going to ruin my life, he will tell me why while looking at my face. My father watched me for a long, silent moment before giving a single, sharp nod. He is in the sacristy. But Chiara, you must be cautious. Giovanni Caccini is not a man who accepts being challenged, especially by a woman. I no longer cared about acceptance. I didn't care about rules or respect, or any of the lessons I had been taught my entire life. Giovanni Caccini had just disgraced me in front of every powerful person we knew. The very least he owed me was to look me in the eyes as my world fell apart. I gathered the layers of my skirt and stormed past my father, ignoring his words of caution. The hall beyond the bridal suite was deserted, but the noise of chaos from the main cathedral was loud. I could hear raised voices, furious arguments, the sounds of alliances shattering over a single broken vow. The sacristy was on the far side of the church. I walked down empty hallways, my shoes clicking on the marble floors, the train of my dress trailing behind me like a sad, ghostly tale. My heart hammered in my chest, a battle raging inside me between terror and rage. I did not knock. I threw the door open and stepped inside. Giovanni was standing by the window with his back to me, one hand resting on the frame. He wore his tuxedo like a suit of armor, perfectly tailored and flawlessly neat. His dark hair was styled back from his face. Even from behind, he projected an aura of absolute power and control. He did not turn when I came in. He did not even acknowledge I was there. He just stood like a statue carved from stone. "Look at me," I demanded, my voice ringing in the small space. For a second, I thought he would ignore me. Then he slowly turned to face me. I first saw Giovanni Caccini when I was 17 years old. He had visited my father's home for a business matter, and my job was to serve them coffee. I was completely intimidated by him back then, this tall, imposing figure with eyes like a winter sea, whose presence could suck all the oxygen out of a room. But I was also drawn to him. There was a pull to his intensity, a captivating quality in the absolute confidence with which he existed. 5 years later, That fascination had morphed into something else entirely. It had become something I convinced myself could be the start of a real marriage. But seeing him now, all I could feel was the sting of his betrayal. Kiara. My name coming from him was flat, devoid of any feeling. You have to give me an explanation, I said, stepping deeper into the room, the silk of my dress whispering. You abandon me at the altar, shame me before our entire world, demolish my reputation, and you refuse to even say why. A muscle in his jaw twitched. It was the only sign he had even heard me. This is not a personal matter. Not personal? My laugh was a short, bitter sound. How could this be anything but personal, Giovanni? You consented to this marriage. Our families arranged it. I have spent months preparing myself to be your wife. And now, just minutes before we are meant to say our vows, you change your mind. How is that not personal? You could not possibly understand. Then help me understand. My voice rose, though I fought to keep it steady. Tell me what I did wrong. Tell me why I am not enough for you. Tell me anything that can make this make sense. He started moving toward me, and I took an involuntary step backward. Giovanni saw it, and for a split second, something flashed in his eyes. It might have been pain, or maybe it was regret. It vanished so fast I could have dreamed it. You did nothing wrong, Kiara. His voice was quiet, tightly controlled. This decision is about me. It is about what I can and cannot permit in my life. And you cannot permit me. I cannot permit what you stand for. His words felt like a slap. What I stand for. I am not a concept, Giovanni. I am a person, a woman who is ready to join her life with yours, who was ready to be by your side through it all, who— My voice cracked. I despised myself for that weakness, for showing vulnerability to this man who seemed to be made of ice. Precisely. He interrupted me, his voice sharp. You were ready to be by my side, to be loyal, and devoted, and committed. Have you any clue what that kind of devotion would mean in my world, Kiara? It means I would have been a devoted wife. It means you would have become a liability. The words were cold and absolute. In my position, I cannot have liabilities. I cannot allow myself to care for anyone or anything outside of this organization. He stopped suddenly, his jaw locking tight. This is the better way for both of us. Believe me. Believe you. My voice was filled with disbelief. You are destroying my life, and you expect me to believe you? Your life is not destroyed. Not. You are young, beautiful, and from a respected family. You will find someone else. That casual dismissal of my entire future set something on fire inside of me. I closed the distance between us before I could stop myself, getting close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I could see the tiny gray specks in his stormy eyes. I was near enough to catch the scent of his cologne. It smelled expensive, and it was uniquely his. I spoke softly, calling him a coward. You are afraid. His eyes went dark with a dangerous anger. Watch what you say, Kiara. Or what? What will you do? Will you shame me even more? Will you ruin what is left of my name? I lifted my chin to lock my eyes with his. You lead the most powerful crime family in Chicago. Other men are terrified of you. Your rivals will not challenge you directly. But there is one thing that scares you. Having real feelings for another person. You know nothing about me. I know you are running from me. You are running from this marriage, from the chance that you might need to care for someone other than yourself. He reached out and his hand closed around my arm. It was not painful, but it was strong enough that I could not get away. Do not think you understand why I do things. I stared back at him and refused to look away. Then make me understand why you would rather ruin both of our lives than risk it. I stopped before I said more. Risk what? His voice was quiet now, a dangerous tone that made my heart beat faster. Risk love. Risk building something that matters. Is that what you believed this marriage would be, Kiara? A fairy tale where the beautiful princess calms the monster? I never saw you as a monster, Giovanni. I saw you as a man. A difficult and dangerous man, yes, but still a man who could be a husband. I stopped speaking. I was mistaken, was I not? You are not a man. You are exactly what people claim you are, a monster that only cares for his own power. My words stayed in the air between us, sharp and painful. For just a second, I saw his composure crack. I saw something broken and real. Then it vanished, hidden again behind the cold look he wore so well. He let go of my arm and moved back. Leave, Kiara. I will be glad to. I held my skirts, ready to walk away with the little pride I still had. But I stopped at the door and turned to face him again. You were correct about one thing, Giovanni. You cannot have weaknesses. And I hope God helps you when you finally see that by pushing everyone away, you have made yourself the weakest man in this city. I walked out before he could answer. My eyes were blurry with tears. I would not let myself cry until I was gone. From behind me, I heard the sound of something breaking against a wall. Good. Let him break things. Let him be angry. It did not change a thing. Giovanni Caccini had turned me away, and now I had to face what came next. 3 months went by like a very slow end. I became a shadow inside my own house. I was a ghost moving through rooms that now seemed too small, too tight. At breakfast, my mother would not look at me. My younger sister would whisper with her friends, but they would go quiet the moment I walked into the room. Even the servants began to treat me in a new way. They showed me pity, and they tried to hide it behind a mask of respect. The rejection did exactly what Giovanni must have intended. It ruined my position in our world. The marriage offers stopped coming. Men who had been interested before now stayed away from me at social events. I was now considered damaged. I was marked by a rejection I could not explain and a shame I could not escape. My father tried his best to act like everything was normal, but I could see the way other families looked at him now. I heard them whisper about his daughter. They wondered what I had done to make Giovanni Caccini so disgusted. Dante Benedetto's name was hurt because of me, and I could not do anything to repair it. I filled my days with books in the library, or I took guarded walks in our gardens. I was alive, but I was not living. At night, I would stay awake and wonder what was so wrong with me. I wondered what Giovanni saw that made him leave. I tried to figure out what flaw I had that made me not good enough to be his wife. The anger was gone now, and something worse had taken its place. I had accepted my fate. This was my life. I was a warning to others. The girl who was almost Giovanni Caccini's wife, but was not good enough to make him stay. It was on a Tuesday afternoon that my world changed once more. I was in the library, sitting in my favorite chair. I held a book, but was not reading it when my father ran into the room. His face was white, and his body shook with a panic he could barely control. "Pack your things," he said without any introduction. "Pack enough for 1 week. Do it this instant." I put my book down as fear shot through me. "Papa, what is wrong? Just do what I tell you, Kiara. Be quick." I was taught to always obey my father. So I went to my room and took out a leather travel bag. My hands were trembling as I packed my clothing, my personal items, the things I needed. From my window I saw strange movements in the courtyard. There were more guards than usual. Men were standing in key locations, holding guns. Maria knocked on my door and came in without asking. Her face was tight with worry as she helped me pack. My panicked hands were clumsy, but she was fast. "What is happening?" I asked her in a low voice. "There has been a betrayal," she whispered, looking toward the door. "Someone close to your father gave information to the Vitale family. They are planning something terrible, and the Benedettos are not safe in Chicago any longer." The Vitales. They were a rival group from Philadelphia. They were known for their violence and for an old hatred of the Chicago families. If they were making a move against my father, it was a declaration of war. "Where are we going?" "You are going to a place of safety." Maria's hands stopped moving over the clothes she was folding. "Your father is sending you to the only man with enough power to keep you safe from the Vitales." A cold feeling moved through my body. No, Giovanni Caccini has offered to protect you. No. I moved away from the bag. I will not go to him. I will not let him have that victory. Chiara, this is not about victory or your pride. Maria put her hands on my shoulders. The Vitali family is without mercy. If they capture you, they will use you to hurt your father in ways you cannot even think of. Giovanni's home is a fortress. His men are dedicated to him. You will be safe with him. I would rather be dead than ask Giovanni Caccini to protect me. You are not asking, Chiara. You are surviving. She held my face in her hands. And you are not going by yourself. Your father has made an agreement. Giovanni will keep you safe, but it comes at a cost. Of course there was a cost. A man like Giovanni Caccini never did a single thing from the kindness of his heart. What is the cost? The wedding he refused 3 months ago. Maria's voice was gentle but strong. He has agreed to marry you for real this time. He will give you his name and his complete protection. In return, your father will help Giovanni move into new areas and will give him information about what the Vitales are doing. A laugh came from me, but it was bitter. So I must marry the man who shamed me, and this time, it is because he wants my father's help. So romantic. Chiara, do not do this. I moved away from her. Do not tell me this is for the best. Do not tell me there is a reason for this. Giovanni made his decision 3 months ago. He does not want me, do you remember? He said I was a weakness that he could not have. Whatever his reasons were then, he is ready to ignore them now. Maria looked worried. Your father is sure that Giovanni will keep his promise this time. The danger to you is very real, Chiara. If the Vitales find you, I know. I shut my eyes, trying not to cry. I know what they will do. I have heard the stories about them. The Vitales did not simply kill people they hated. They took them apart piece by piece, slowly. They used every kind of mental and physical pain they could think of. Women were especially targeted. They were made to suffer terrible things to break them and to break their families. My father had a good reason to be scared. I had a good reason to be scared. But going to Giovanni was like leaving one cage just to enter another. How much time do I have? I asked at last, and I opened my eyes. Your father wants you to leave in the next hour. Giovanni is sending his own guards to bring you to his home. Of course he is. I went back to the bag and started adding more things like a machine. He cannot even trust the Benedettos to bring their own daughter safely. It is not a matter of trust. It is a matter of force. Maria closed the zipper on the bag. Giovanni's men have better training and better weapons. They will make sure you arrive alive. That is the only thing that is important at this moment. The ride to Giovanni's property was 45 minutes. It took us away from Chicago and into a place I had never seen before. The security guards were just as Maria had said they would be. They were professional, armed with heavy weapons, and they said nothing. I sat in the back of a bulletproof car. I watched the city turn into suburbs. Then we drove to the private estate where Giovanni Caccini lived and worked. The property was impressive and also frightening. There were tall walls that had security cameras and what appeared to be sharp wire on top. There was a gate that had several security checks. Guards stood at different spots, holding automatic weapons as if it were normal. This was not a house, it was a fortress. We went through 3 different security gates before the car finally came to a stop in front of a giant stone house. It was built in an Italian style, with beautiful shapes and quiet luxury. It should have looked lovely, but instead, it felt like a large, cold tomb. A guard opened the door for me. "Mr. Caccini is inside waiting for you, miss." Of course he was waiting. Giovanni was probably enjoying the sight of me being brought here like a captive taken to her new prison. I got out of the car. I held my head up high, even though my stomach was twisted with fear. The afternoon sun felt warm, but I was cold inside. A woman stood in the entrance of the big house. She was older, maybe 60, with gentle eyes. Her graying hair was tied back in a perfect bun. Miss Benedetto, she said to me with a small Italian accent. I am Rosa, Mr. Caccini's housekeeper. Welcome. She said welcome, as if I were a visitor and not someone running for her life. I walked inside behind her. My shoes made a clicking sound on the marble floors. Those floors probably cost more than what most people earn in a whole year. The inside of the house was just as I had pictured it. It was expensive, well decorated, and had no warmth at all. The decor was dark wood and muted colors, filled with art that seemed original, not like common prints. This was a house built to intimidate, not to welcome. Rosa led me up a grand, curving staircase. Mr. Caccini suggested I show you to your rooms, she said. He believed you would want to rest and refresh before your conversation. How thoughtful. Giovanni was likely giving me time to compose myself for the fight he knew was coming. I trailed Rosa down a long corridor into a suite that dwarfed my bedroom back home. It had a sitting room, a bedroom with a silk-draped four-poster bed, a bathroom containing both a shower and a deep tub, and a walk-in closet. The closet was already stocked with clothing in my size. Rosa saw me looking. Mr. Caccini had these brought for you, she explained. If something is not right or you dislike it, please tell me. We can have it altered or replaced. I brushed my hand against a silk blouse, a slow burn of anger building under my calm surface. Giovanni had planned for my arrival. He had bought me a complete wardrobe and prepared this beautiful cage just for me. When does he want our meeting? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. He will see you whenever you are ready, signorina. There is no need to hurry. With men like Giovanni, there was always a hurry. Every second was planned, every move had a purpose. If he was offering me time, it was to make me feel unsteady, anxious, and weak. Tell Mr. Caccini I am ready for him now. I looked directly into Rosa's eyes. I have no need to rest or refresh myself. Let us finish this. Rosa paused for a moment, then gave a slight nod. Please, follow me. She guided me back down the stairs and into another section of the vast home. We came to a stop before a thick wooden door. Rosa knocked once, then opened it for me. Miss Benedetto is here, sir. Thank you, Rosa. The voice from inside belonged to Giovanni. It was that same deep, controlled sound that had invaded my sleep for months. I walked into a room that was obviously his study. It was filled with dark wood and leather, with bookshelves reaching the ceiling and large windows that looked out onto the property. Giovanni was standing behind a huge desk. His hands were flat on its surface, and his gaze was locked on me with the same intensity I recalled from our last meeting. He appeared changed, perhaps older and more weary. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his jaw was clenched with stress. Chiara. He said my name again, but his tone held an emotion I could not place. Giovanni. I stayed near the door, keeping a safe distance. I am told I will be your captive for the near future. You are not a captive, he said, standing up straight and walking around the desk. You are under my protection. Is there truly a distinction? Yes. He paused several feet from me, putting his hands into his pockets. The movement was meant to appear relaxed. Instead, it highlighted the tension in his body. A captive is held against her will. You are here because the only other option is to be captured and murdered by the Vitales. So, I either marry you or I die. My voice remained even. That is so romantic, Giovanni. You certainly have a way of charming a woman. His jaw grew tighter. Your father and I made an arrangement. I already know about the arrangement, I interrupted him. I am not a fool. You require my father's backing for your expansion, and he requires your power to shield his daughter. It is a transaction, same as the first wedding attempt. But this time, you are actually completing it, because the reward is greater than your fear. A flicker of something crossed his eyes. Fear. So that was it. I took a step forward, my anger fueling my courage. 3 months ago, your fear made you push me away. You were afraid of what I stood for. afraid of loving someone, afraid of showing weakness. Now the situation has forced you to act, so you are taking what you once ran from. You have no idea what you are saying. Do I not? I took another step. We were so close I could see the muscle twitching in his jaw. I could smell his familiar cologne. Tell me, Giovanni, what is different now? Did you have a sudden revelation that I am not a weakness? Or did you just calculate that the strategic gain from this marriage was worth more than your precious emotional defenses? He moved with such speed that I had no chance to prepare. 1 second he was still, and the next his hand was clamped around my wrist. He pulled me so close that I had to crane my neck to look at him. Do you want to know what is different now? His voice was a low, dangerous whisper. I will tell you. 3 months ago, I told myself that keeping you at a distance was the right thing to do. I believed I was shielding you from the shadows in my world, from the danger that comes with being linked to me. I convinced myself you deserved someone else, someone safer, someone who could offer you a normal life. His hold on me tightened just enough for me to feel it. Then I stood by and saw the pain my choice caused you. I saw your family's name destroyed because I turned you away. I saw you fade into a shadow of yourself, consumed by the shame I forced upon you. I saw you become invisible inside your own house. And it hit me. My noble act was nothing but fear disguised as a righteous excuse. I tried to pull back, but his grip was like iron. Let me go. Not until I finish. His free hand moved to my neck, his fingers wrapping around it with a touch that was both gentle and claiming. When the Vitales made your family a target, it gave me the reason I needed. It was a way to shield you that appeared strategic instead of emotional. Your father's alliance is helpful to me. That is true. But I would have offered my protection anyway. I would have made you my wife anyway, because those 3 months of seeing what I did to you were a living hell, Chiara. I will not waste one more day pretending I do not want you as my wife. My breath hitched in my throat. This was not the man from 3 months ago. This was not a rejection hidden behind a shield of protection. This was raw, unfiltered possession. You cannot do this, I whispered. You do not get to shatter me into pieces and then decide you want me back. Life does not work that way. I know. His thumb traced the line of my jaw. I know I broke your trust. I know I shamed you in the most public way imaginable. I know I have no right to ask for another opportunity, but I am asking. Because the alternative, letting you go, seeing another man claim you, that is worse than any torment I could face. And what do I want? My voice trembled no matter how hard I tried to steady it. What if marrying you is not what I want? What if I prefer to face the Vitales over being tied to the man who made me feel like I was nothing? His expression shattered. Then I will protect you regardless. I will keep you secure. I will make sure your father's standing is safe, and I will release you when the danger is gone. But Chiara, his voice became even quieter. Do not ask me to see you marry someone else. Do not ask me to step aside while another man takes what I threw away. I am not strong enough for that. The confession stayed in the air between us, completely raw and real. I wanted to cling to my rage, to my pain, to the justified anger I felt for being cast aside and shamed. But as I looked into Giovanni's stormy gray eyes, I saw something I had never witnessed there. Weakness. True, undefended weakness from a man who presented only ice and power to the world. If I consent to this, I said carefully, if I become your wife, it has to be different this time. In what way? You will not own me and then push me away. You will not call me your wife but treat me like an object. You wanted me badly enough to plead for another chance. So you will have to let me inside. Completely inside. No more walls. No more shielding. No more fear pretending to be honor. His eyes grew darker. You do not understand what you are asking for. I understand perfectly what I am asking for. I held his stare. I am asking for honesty, all of it, about the man you are, the things you do, the things that frighten you. I am asking to be your equal, not your prize. I am asking for the real Giovanni Caccini, not the disguise that you show to everyone else." He was quiet for a long time. Then, very slowly, he nodded his head. "You will have it. All of it." But Kiara, his hand on my neck squeezed almost too gently to notice. "After you have seen everything, you may wish that wall was still between us. That will be my decision to make." "Then make it." His voice was strained. "Marry me. Be my wife. Let me show you I can be the man you should have, not the coward who fled." I should have refused. I should have asked for time to think about everything that had just occurred. I should have guarded what was left of my heart from a man who had already proven he could shatter it. But seeing Giovanni, feeling the heat of his hands on me, looking past his control to the desperation underneath, I heard myself speak the single word that would alter my life. Yes. He shut his eyes for a second, and I could see the relief flood his face. Then they opened again, dark and burning, and I saw a hunger in them that made my heart pound. "This will be different," he vowed. "I will not let fear control me this time. You had better not." I leaned back just enough to look him in the eye. "Because I will not make it through a second rejection from you, Giovanni. This is the only chance you will get to do this correctly." "Then I will do it correctly." He pressed his forehead against mine. "Even if it is the last thing I do." The wedding was set for 1 week from that day. There was no great cathedral this time. There were no 500 guests to watch. It was just a quiet service in the chapel on Giovanni's estate, attended by immediate family and a small number of trusted men. My father was adamant about being there despite the air crackled with danger, and Giovanni's men responded by adding security that moved with military precision. I barely saw Giovanni in the days before the ceremony. He was consumed with the Vitali threat, holding meetings with allies and reinforcing our defenses. But every night, I could hear his footsteps in the hall outside my room, a restless pacing that echoed my own inability to sleep. The third night, I couldn't stand it any longer. When I opened my door, he was standing right there, his hand raised as if he had been just about to knock. We just looked at each other for a long moment, the air thick with everything we had not said. "Can't sleep?" I asked, but the dark circles under his eyes made the answer obvious. "I keep thinking you'll change your mind." His voice was rough in a way I had never heard. "That you will wake up and realize that marrying me is completely insane." "It is insane," I agreed, stepping back to let him in. But I still said yes. He paused at the doorway, and I could see the battle raging in his eyes. He had built such high walls around himself, and they were fighting to remain standing even as he was trying to pull them down for me. "Come in, Giovanni." I walked over to the sitting area and curled up on the couch. "If we are getting married in 4 days, we should probably try talking like real people." He came inside slowly, shutting the door behind him. He surprised me by not taking the chair across from me. Instead, he sat on the other end of the sofa, so close I could have reached out and touched him. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "Everything," I said, pulling my knees to my chest and wrapping my arms around them. "But we can start with why you actually rejected me 3 months ago. And do not feed me that line about protecting me. I want the real reason." He was silent for such a long time that I started to think he would not answer. Then he leaned his head back against the sofa cushions and stared at the ceiling. "My father was a monster," he said at last. "I do not use that word lightly. Luca Caccini was a brutal, paranoid man, and he was completely devoted to only one person in his miserable life: my mother." I stayed silent, knowing this was a story that could not be rushed. She was his weak spot. Everybody knew it. And when I was 17, his enemies used that against him. Giovanni's jaw clenched. "They took her. They held her for 3 days while they negotiated with my father. He gave them everything they demanded: money, territory, information on rival families, all of it. And they still killed her. Slowly, horribly. They sent him tapes of her last hours." A wave of horror crashed over me. "Giovanni." My father was never the same after that. He spoke as if I had not said a word. He became even more savage, more suspicious. He died 5 years later. And I knew it was because losing her had rotted him from the inside out. He was one of the most powerful men in the organization, and loving someone too much brought him to his knees. Understanding began to click into place. So when you started to have feelings for me, I saw my father's story happening all over again. He turned his head to meet my gaze, and the agony in his eyes was raw and awful. Every time I looked at you, every time you smiled at me in the months before the wedding, I could feel myself falling. And it terrified me, because caring for you meant giving my enemies a weapon to use against me. It meant making myself vulnerable in a world where being vulnerable gets you killed. So you pushed me away, I finished for him. I told myself it was the only right thing to do. His hand on his thigh tightened into a fist. That you would be safer if you had nothing to do with me. That I would be stronger if I was not distracted by worrying about you. I stood at that altar 3 months ago and convinced myself I was doing something noble. But you were not. No. The word was saturated with regret. I was a coward. I let my fear dictate my choices, and you were the one who paid for it. Your name, your position among the families, your sense of self. I wrecked all of it because I was too scared to admit that I had fallen in love with you. My breath hitched in my throat. He had said it so simply, as if the words did not change the entire world. You loved me. Love, he corrected, his gaze locked on mine. Present tense. I love you, Kiara. I have loved you since you were 20 years old, and you spilled wine on your dress at your father's birthday party. You laughed instead of being upset. You joked it was a new fashion statement and continued to serve your guests as if nothing had happened. In that instant, I saw your strength, your poise under pressure, your refusal to be defeated by small mistakes, and I was completely lost. Tears started to well in my eyes. Then why did you not? Because love scares me more than any enemy I have ever gone up against. He moved closer, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. But these last 3 months have shown me something even worse than fear. Living without you, knowing what I did to you, watching you disappear into yourself, seeing the cost of my cowardice. That was hell, Kiara. A real, actual hell. So when this Vitali mess gave you a reason to come back, I grabbed it. He cupped my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. I took it selfishly and desperately. I know it makes me a monster. I know I am using your fear and your father's panic to get what I want, but I cannot make myself regret it, because the only other option is to lose you for good. I leaned into his hand, unable to help myself. You hurt me, Giovanni, worse than anyone ever has. I know. I spent months believing I was worthless, that there was something wrong with me, that I was so broken you could not even stand to look at me. Kiara, his voice cracked. And now you want me to just believe that it was all because you were scared? That you loved me this whole time but were too afraid to do anything about it? I pulled away, anger and pain fighting inside my chest. Do you have any idea what that makes me feel like? Tell me, he said, moving closer again, his presence almost suffocating. Tell me exactly how you feel. Scream at me. Hit me if you have to. I deserve every bit of it. I do not want to hit you. I stood up and paced toward the window. The grounds were black except for the security lamps, making the world outside the glass seem distant and fake. I want to know how someone can say they love me while doing something so intentionally cruel. Because I am broken, Kiara. He also stood, but he kept his distance. My father's paranoia, his violence, his own destruction, that is in my blood. I was raised watching love get turned into a weapon, watching devotion become a death sentence. When I started caring about you, every single instinct I had screamed at me to get away. So you did. So I did. He moved to stand behind me, so close I could feel the heat from his body. And I have regretted it every single day since then. Not only because I hurt you, which is enough to damn me, but because I lost 3 months of being with you, 3 months of talks like this one, 3 months of discovering who you are under the perfect princess mask your family made you wear. I turned to look at him, and found him nearer than I expected. You do not know me at all, Giovanni. You fell in love with a concept, a girl in a dress with a wine stain who could laugh at herself. I am not that simple. I know. His hand rose, his fingers gently tangling in my hair. That is what this week is for us to learn each other, to really learn, not just things we see on the surface. I want to know what keeps you up at night, what makes you laugh so hard your sides ache, what you dream of when you let yourself think about a future you get to choose. I dream about being more than just a wife, I admitted before I could hold it back. More than a bargaining chip in family politics. I dream of being important for who I am, not who I am married to. You are important to me, he said fiercely, not because you are a Benedetto, not because our marriage helps my interests. You are important because you are Chiara, stubborn, brave, and strong enough to stand here and call me a coward to my face. You are a coward. I was, he said, pressing his forehead against mine. But I am trying to stop being one. Give me the chance to prove it to you, Chiara. Let me use the rest of my life to show you that my fear is not what defines us. I wanted to fight it, to cling to my anger and my pain. But standing so near to Giovanni, feeling the slight shake in his hands as they held my face, seeing the raw vulnerability he was showing me, I felt a change deep inside my chest. If we do this, I said slowly, if I truly become your wife, then I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more running away. I met his eyes. When things are hard, when you are afraid, when your gut tells you to push me out, you come to me. You talk to me. You let me help you with whatever you are carrying. Because I will not survive you abandoning me again, Giovanni. This time it has to be different, or it cannot happen at all. It will be different. He kissed my forehead, then my cheeks, then the corner of my mouth. I swear it to you, Chiara. I swear on my mother's memory, on my title, on my own life. I will not run from you ever again. When I am afraid, you will be the first person I tell. When I feel the urge to pull away, I will pull you closer. I will fight every instinct I have if that is what it takes to keep you. You had better, I whispered. I tilted my head back, giving an invitation I was not sure I should offer but could not seem to stop myself from making. Because I am finished being the understanding, patient princess. If you hurt me like that again, I will make you regret it in ways you cannot even begin to imagine. His smile was slow, and it was devastating. I would not expect anything less. And then he kissed me, a real kiss for the very first time. It was not the proper kiss we had shared before the wedding that never happened, but something deep and possessive and completely electrifying. His hands tightened in my hair, tilting my head to give him better access, and I simply melted into him. This was what I had dreamed of during all those months of planning, this feeling of connection. The heat was overwhelming, as was the feeling of being wanted with a need so intense it felt like desperation. Giovanni's kiss was an act of survival, like he was a starving man and I was his first meal, like he had been pulled from the water and I was his first breath of air. We finally pulled away from each other, both of us breathing heavily. He pressed his forehead to mine, his eyes shut and his jaw clenched with effort. 4 more days, he said, his voice raw. In 4 more days, you will be my wife. You will legally and officially be mine. I am not a piece of property, Giovanni. No. His eyes shot open, burning with a dark fire. You are so much more than that. You are my salvation, Chiara. You are the one thing that might save me from turning into my father. The gravity of his admission fell upon us. I could see the honesty of it reflected in his gaze. He wasn't marrying me simply for protection or as part of a strategy. He was marrying me with the belief that I could somehow redeem his soul and pull him away from the darkness that had raised him. It was an enormous responsibility, a staggering amount of pressure, but as I looked at him, I knew I had to try. Then let me be the one to save you, I whispered. But you must let me see everything, Giovanni. There can be no more walls, no more layers of protection. If I am to be your wife, I must know all of you. Even the parts you believe will drive me away. They will scare you. Perhaps. I lifted my hand, tracing the hard line of his jaw. But they will not make me run. Not this time. I have already lived through your worst, Giovanni. I am certain I can face the rest. He took my hand in his, bringing it to his lips to kiss my palm. 4 days, and then I will dedicate my life to showing you that you made the right decision. You had better, I replied. But this time, my words held no trace of anger, only a glimmer of hope. The wedding ceremony was nothing like the one I had dreamed of as a young girl. There was no flowing white dress, no grand cathedral filled with flowers, no storybook moment of gliding down a long aisle. Instead, I wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk, carried a small bouquet of white roses, and stood inside Giovanni's private chapel before fewer than 20 guests. Yet, when Giovanni grasped my hand and recited his vows, his intense gaze locking with mine and stealing my breath, I knew this was far better than any fairy tale. This was real, and it was raw. We were two damaged people choosing one another when every ounce of logic screamed against it. I, Giovanni Caccini, take you Chiara Benedetto to be my wife, he declared, his voice firm yet strained with emotion. I vow to shield you, to treasure you, and to never again allow fear to dictate my actions when it comes to you. I vow to become the man you deserve, even when the thought of it terrifies me. When my turn came, I spoke the words I had practiced in my mind for days. I, Chiara Benedetto, take you, Giovanni Caccini, to be my husband. I promise to be your partner, to challenge you when you need it, and to show you that strength and weakness can exist together. I promise to be your ally in everything, even when the future seems dark. The priest declared us husband and wife, and Giovanni kissed me as if he were laying claim to a precious treasure he had nearly lost. In that instant, surrounded by people who fully understood the weight of our union, a sense of peace settled deep within my chest. This was the right choice. It was complicated, messy, and could end in disaster, but it was right. The reception took place in Giovanni's formal dining room, a private dinner instead of a large-scale celebration. My father proposed a brief toast that served as both a blessing and a caution, reminding Giovanni that the Benedetto family always protects its members. Giovanni's reply was direct. So do the Caccinis, and Chiara is a Caccini now. Hearing my name spoken that way sent a shiver of excitement through me. Mrs. Giovanni Caccini. It should have felt like a cage, but instead, it felt like a suit of armor. After the meal, Giovanni guided me to a different section of the mansion, to his personal living quarters. The master suite was even grander than the guest rooms I had been staying in, featuring a huge bed that appeared to be custom-built, a sitting area with a fireplace, and towering windows that offered a view of the gardens. "This is our room now," Giovanni stated, studying my expression closely. "If you would feel more comfortable with your own space, I can have it arranged." "No," I interrupted, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "We are married, Giovanni. Actually married this time. That means sharing a room, a bed, and a life." A fire ignited in his eyes. "Are you certain? We can approach this slowly. I do not expect—" "What is it you do not expect?" I stepped closer, feeling braver as his eyes followed my every move. That I would want to finalize our marriage? That I would want my own husband to touch me? His jaw tightened. "Chiara, for months you have been convinced that I view you as too delicate, too innocent, too pure for my dark existence." I came to a stop directly before him. "But I am much stronger than you imagine, Giovanni, and I am tired of being handled as if I might shatter." "I do not think you will shatter." His hands rose to cup my face. "I think that I will. Touching you, possessing you, it makes you real in a way that fills me with terror. Because now I truly have something to lose." You have always had something to lose. I leaned into his hands. You simply refused to acknowledge it until the situation forced you to, but we are here now, married and committed. So stop being afraid and touch your wife. The words had barely left my lips before he was kissing me, with more depth and demand than ever before. His hands slid from my face to my waist, yanking me tight against his body, and I could feel his control splintering with each passing moment. Tell me to stop, he breathed against my lips. Tell me you need more time, and I will wait. I will wait an eternity if that is what you require. I do not need time. I reached for the buttons on his shirt. I need you to stop treating me as though I am made of glass. He seized my wrists, his breathing ragged. If I start, I will not be gentle. I will not be the tender, careful lover you likely imagined. I will claim you, Kiara, in every possible way. Are you prepared for that? Staring into his stormy gray eyes, seeing the hunger and the possession and the desperate need swirling within them, I made my decision. Yes. What came next was precisely what he had promised. It was not gentle, and it was not careful, but it was absolutely all-consuming. Giovanni made love to me as if he were trying to brand his mark on my very soul, as if he feared I would vanish if he did not hold on tight enough. And I met his intensity with my own, taking as much as I gave, proving to him that I was far stronger than he knew. Later, we lay wrapped in sheets that cost more than most furniture. My head rested on his chest, while his fingers absent-mindedly drew circles on my shoulder. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt a sensation that was almost peace. I love you, Giovanni said into the quiet room. I know I have said it before, but now that you are truly my wife, I need you to know the absolute depth of that statement. You are everything, Kiara. Everything I believed I could never have, should never desire, and would only ruin if I ever claimed you. But you are mine now, and I will defend that with my entire being. I love you too. The words came out unexpectedly, but they were true. Somewhere between his rejection of me and his redemption, I had fallen in love with this complicated, dangerous man. Even though you are infuriating, emotionally challenged, and have the worst timing in the world. He laughed, a deep rumble that vibrated from his chest into my ear. I will accept that as a glowing recommendation. We began to drift off to sleep, feeling safe in our new reality. But around 3 in the morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of Giovanni's phone buzzing relentlessly on the bedside table. He grabbed it instantly, his voice sharp and alert, though he had been sound asleep just seconds earlier. What? A beat of silence. When? Another pause. This one lasted longer. I will be down in 5 minutes. Double the perimeter security and wake Dante. He hung up and was out of bed before I could even ask a question. Giovanni, what is happening? The Vitalis are acting sooner than we predicted. He was already pulling on his clothes. They have established contact with someone on the inside. A traitor is giving them information. A chill spread through my body. Who? That is what we are going to find out. He bent down, giving me a quick, firm kiss on the mouth. You will stay here. Lock this door when I am gone, and do not open it for anyone but me or Rosa. Do you understand? You cannot just abandon me here without an explanation. Kiara. He gripped my shoulders. I need you to be safe. That is the only thing that matters right now. Promise me you will stay in this room. I wanted to fight him, to insist that he treat me as an equal partner instead of something fragile to be guarded. But the fear in his eyes, a raw and primal fear, made me stop. I promise. But Giovanni, be careful. I always am. He kissed me once more, and then he was gone. I locked the door as he had told me to and began to pace the room, my mind racing. From the windows, I could see a surge of activity on the estate grounds. More guards, more lights, a level of commotion that signaled a significant threat. 1 hour crawled by, then a second. I was debating whether to break my promise and search for him when I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were heavy, deliberate, but they sounded wrong. It was not Giovanni's walk. The doorknob jiggled. Mrs. Caccini, Mr. Giovanni has sent me to escort you to a safer location. The voice was unfamiliar, and I knew Giovanni would have called to tell me if he was sending someone. My hand went to my phone, but before I could make a call, the door flew open, its lock completely destroyed by brute force. 3 men stormed in, their guns raised. The man in the lead offered a cold smile. Mrs. Cassini, the Vitalists send their best wishes. I was being kidnapped before breakfast on my first day as a wife. The irony was not lost on me as the Vitalis men shoved me into a large vehicle, secured my wrists with zip ties, and sped away from Giovanni's property at a speed that showed they had no regard for traffic laws. The man who had kicked in my door, whom I heard the others call Marco, kept his weapon pointed at me for the entire journey. This is not personal, Signora, but you are far more valuable to us as leverage than dead. Cooperate, and you will get through this alive. I said nothing. I could not form words past the terror that choked me. Everything Giovanni had worried about, every warning he had given me, was coming true. I had been turned into the perfect weapon for his enemies to use against him. We drove for about 20 minutes, finally stopping in an area that looked like a district of abandoned warehouses. The building they brought me into seemed ordinary on the outside, but the inside was clearly set up for me. There was a single chair bolted to the concrete floor. Harsh industrial lights hung from the ceiling. Cameras were mounted in several corners. They planned to film everything they did to me. They would send the recording to Giovanni to prove I was alive and suffering. Be comfortable. Marco shoved me toward the chair, using more restraints to fasten my zip-tied wrists to its arms. I am aware this is not the luxury you know as Mrs. Caccini, but your stay will be short. Just long enough for your husband to accept our terms. He will not deal with you. I struggled to keep my voice from shaking. Giovanni does not bargain with people who threaten his family. Is that what you are to him now? Family? Marco squatted down in front of me, a nasty smile on his face. That is amusing. The story we heard was that he left you at the altar 3 months ago, shamed you in front of the entire city. That is a very strange way to define family. That was a different time, before you had value. He got to his feet and took out his phone. You see, we are fully aware of why Giovanni Caccini had a sudden change of heart about marrying you. Your father's backing, the strategic gain, the joining of 2 powers. You are not his wife, Signora. You are his property. And now, you belong to us. His words were sharp, because they mirrored my own secret doubts. Was I truly Giovanni's wife? Or was I just a convenient answer to a set of problems? He claimed he loved me, but was that love real, or was it just another strategy? Marco started to film. Giovanni Caccini, you have probably noticed by now that your new bride is gone. We are holding her, and she is safe for the moment, but that situation will change if our demands are not met. He rattled off a list of conditions that I barely heard. My mind focused on remaining composed, on denying them the pleasure of watching me fall apart. After he finished recording, Marco sent the video, then faced me again. All we do now is wait. It should not be long. A man like Cassini will act quickly when his beautiful young wife is in trouble. But the hours dragged on with absolute silence. The sun rose, the morning passed, and the afternoon faded. Marco became more and more on edge, making frantic calls, yelling at his men, and staring at his phone like a madman. He is not answering, one of the other men said, his voice laced with fear. What if he does not care as much as we figured? He cares. Marco's voice cut through the tension. He has to. She is his wife. But a seed of doubt was growing in my mind, in Marco's, in everyone's inside that warehouse. What if Giovanni had determined I was not worth the price? What if his actions 3 months ago were the truth, and this marriage was purely a business move? It was almost completely dark outside when the world erupted. One of Marco's guards crashed through the door, his face white with terror. They have found us. Cassini's men. The entire building is surrounded. Marco let out a string of vicious curses. How many of them are there? All of them. This is not a small rescue party. This is a full-blown army. I could hear it through the thin walls, the rumble of engines, the sounds of organized deployment, the presence of a force that was far larger than the few men holding me captive. Marco seized my arm, yanking me to my feet while he jammed his gun against the side of my head. "No one moves," he screamed at his crew. "We still have her. She is the only thing keeping us alive." The door did not just open, it exploded off its hinges, flying inward. Armed men flooded the room, moving with the deadly calm of trained soldiers. And trailing them, dressed in solid black with a pistol in each hand and pure murder in his eyes, was Giovanni. His eyes swept the room, taking everything in instantly. Me, tied to the chair. Marco, holding a gun to my head. The other Vitali men fumbling for their weapons. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. What I saw there took my breath away. It was not strategy. It was not a calculated move. It was pure, unfiltered rage at the sight of me in danger. "Let her go, Marco." Giovanni's voice was unnervingly quiet. "Let her go now, and I might think about making your death a fast one. I do not think so." Marco's hand trembled against my skin. "She is my way out of this mess. You stay back, or I will put a bullet in her head, right here." "No, you will not." Giovanni walked forward slowly, his aim steady. "Because the moment you pull that trigger, there will be nothing on this earth to stop me from ripping you to shreds with my own two hands. And believe me, Marco, you would rather have the bullet than what I will do to you if you harm my wife. Stay away from me." Marco's panic filled the air. "I am warning you, Cazzini. It all happened in a single, violent second." Giovanni fired. The shot was so impossibly precise that it hit Marco's gun hand, forcing him to drop his weapon. He let out a scream of agony. In that same instant, Giovanni closed the distance between them, his fist smashing into Marco's jaw with a sound of cracking bone. Marco collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. Giovanni's team handled the other men with brutal speed. In just a few moments, every Vitali soldier was either disarmed, tied up, or unconscious. And through it all, Giovanni's eyes never left me. He put his guns away and knelt in front of my chair, his hands surprisingly gentle as he started to undo the restraints. "Are you hurt? Did they put their hands on you? I swear to God, Chiara, if even one of them touched you." "I am okay." The words came out as a broken whisper. "I am okay, Giovanni. Just terrified." The last of the ties fell away, and he pulled me from the chair and into his arms, crushing me against him until I could hardly draw a breath. His entire frame was trembling, not from fear, but from a violence he was struggling to contain. "I thought you were gone when I saw your room was torn apart. Your phone was on the floor. You were nowhere." His voice broke. "I thought I had failed to protect you all over again." "The one who betrayed you?" I asked, my face buried in his chest. "He has been handled." His tone made it clear that fate was not a pleasant one. "It was Carlo, one of my own captains. He had been leaking information to the Vitalis for months, just waiting for the right moment. Taking you was meant to be the move that broke me, the thing that would make me negotiate from a place of weakness. But you did not negotiate." "No." He leaned back just enough to hold my face in his hands, his gaze intense. "I hunted. I cashed in every single favor, called on every contact, and sent out every man loyal to me. The Vitalis believed that taking you would leave me exposed. Instead, it made me a killer." Marco moaned from the floor, blood pouring from his shattered nose. Giovanni's eyes shifted to him, and his expression turned cold and terrifying. "Take him," he told his men, and the others. "Make them an example of what happens to those who dare to threaten the Caccini family." "Giovanni," I began, but he was already scooping me up into his arms, carrying me out of the warehouse as if I weighed nothing at all. Outside, a line of cars was waiting, with more guards than I had ever seen in one place. He carefully placed me in the back of his armored sport utility vehicle and then got in beside me, wrapping his arms around me once more. "Get us home," he told the driver. "And I want double the security at the compound. I want to know if a mouse even thinks about crossing our property line." As we sped away, the terror began to fade, leaving me completely drained and shaking. Giovanni's arms held me tighter, and I could hear him whispering something in Italian into my hair. It sounded like a prayer, or maybe it was a promise. "You came for me," I whispered. "Of course I came for you." He gently tilted my head up. "You are my wife, Chiara. My wife. You are not a piece of property. You are not a strategy or a convenient business deal. You are mine. You are the woman I love more than I love power, more than territory, more than my own life." "Did you really think I would abandon you to them?" Marco said. I hesitated, not knowing how to say what I feared most. "What did he tell you? That the only reason you married me was for strategy? That I was just useful to you, and nothing else?" Giovanni's face grew dark. "I am going to make Marco's punishment a very special kind of pain." He rested his forehead against mine. "I need you to listen to me, Chiara. Listen very closely. I married you because I am in love with you, because a life without you was hell, because you are the only truly real and good thing in my dark, twisted world. Yes, the timing was helpful. Yes, your father's loyalty helps me. But I would have married you no matter what. I would have protected you no matter what. You are not a strategy. You are my entire world." Tears started to slide down my face. I was so afraid. It was not just my fear of them, but my fear of what their actions meant. "You had rejected me before, and I was afraid you would do it again." His voice was intense. "I will never give you a reason to question how important you are to me again. For every day that we are alive, I will prove that marrying you was the greatest decision I have ever made. I will demonstrate that my love is genuine, not a tactic. You are my treasure, not a tool. I promise you. I swear it." He kissed me, and his touch was gentle, even with the violence that still coursed through him. "And I honor my promises, Chiara. Always." When we returned to the compound, Giovanni carried me straight to our room, ignoring my arguments that I was able to walk. He placed me on the bed and began to examine every part of me for injuries. His hands were careful yet thorough. "I am fine," I told him one more time. "Truly. They did not injure me. They frightened you. They stole you from our bed on the night of our wedding. They made you feel unsafe in the one place that ought to be your sanctuary." His jaw was clenched. "That cannot be forgiven. But you came for me. You rescued me. I should have stopped it from ever happening." He sat down on the bed next to me. "This is the exact thing I was afraid of, Chiara. This is the reason I tried to keep you at a distance. Because being my wife puts a target on you. It makes you a target for anyone who wants to use you to hurt me, and I am still here." I reached for his hand. "I am still your wife. I still choose you, even knowing the risk." "That ought to mean something to you, Giovanni. It means you are more courageous than I have a right to." "No." I climbed onto his lap, sitting across him, making him look me in the eyes. "It means our love is worth the danger. It means that being with you, truly with you, is far better than a protected, hollow existence without you." Today was horrifying. With no sign of rescue, I was certain you with no sign of rescue, I was certain you were on your way. I was certain you would not abandon me there. That faith, Giovanni, is the reason this works. It is not your power, or your assets, or your capacity to shield me from every danger. It is simply the absolute knowledge that you will always retrieve me. He drew me in, pressing his face into the curve of my neck. "I always will. It does not matter the price. It does not matter what I must tear down to reach you. I will always come and get you." We remained that way for a long while, embracing one another, absorbing the truth of what took place and what it all meant. I had been challenged and I had passed. I was not delicate, not defenseless, not the liability Giovanni worried I would be. I was strong enough to exist in his world, strong enough to be his real partner. The Vitales are not going to give up, I finally said. This was only the start. I know. His arms grew tighter around me. But they made an error. They revealed to me the lengths I will go to keep you safe. And now every family, every competitor, every foe understands. To touch Chiara Caccini is to invite the total fury of my entire organization. They have transformed you from a supposed vulnerability into the most formidable woman in Chicago. How did you arrive at that conclusion? He leaned back to see my face, and his smile was menacing. Because any person who threatens you is threatening the single thing I would set the world on fire to defend. That means you are beyond reach, Chiara. You are sacred. You are mine. The effects of my abduction sent tremors through the entire organization. Giovanni's retaliation against the Vitales was immediate and brutal. In less than a week, their entire Chicago network was taken apart. Their bosses were either dead or had escaped the city. The warning was unmistakable. If you challenge the Caccini family, you will be destroyed. But the most significant transformation was in Giovanni himself. He became gentler with me while growing harsher with all others. He rescheduled meetings to fit my own calendar. He involved me in high-level planning, and he sought my input on issues he had never discussed with anyone else. It was as if my survival of the kidnapping had confirmed something for him. That I was not some delicate object needing his protection, but a partner he could rely on. 2 months after our wedding, I woke up to see Giovanni already in his suit, standing near our bedroom window with his phone to his ear. He looked distressed, and I could hear enough of the call to realize something was amiss. "How much time?" he asked the person on the line. "And you are positive?" There was a short silence. "I understand. My thanks for the information." He hung up and just stood there, his posture stiff with stress. "Giovanni." I sat up, clutching the bedsheet to myself. "What is wrong?" "That was Marco Benedetto." He turned toward me, and the look on his face made me hold my breath. "Your cousin. He has been looking into a matter for me for the past few weeks." "Looking into what?" "The details surrounding the Vitali assault." Giovanni came and sat on the mattress. "How they knew the perfect time and location to abduct you. How they managed to bypass our security with such ease. How they were familiar enough with our compound's design to make their move when I was preoccupied somewhere else." A chill spread through my body. "Another traitor? Not in the way you think." His jaw became rigid. "Marco discovered proof that the assault was made possible by an individual with deep knowledge of both Benedetto and Caccini business. A person who stood to gain from sowing discord between our families. Someone who wished for me to be weakened, doubted, and possibly stripped of my authority." Who was it? "Antonio Russo." The name landed like a punch. "He has been collaborating with a group inside the Cosa Nostra that thinks I am gaining too much influence, becoming too erratic. They interpret my marriage to you as a weakness, as proof that I am letting my personal emotions interfere with my decisions." I pictured Antonio, one of Giovanni's most tenured allies, a man who attended our wedding. But for what reason? What is his benefit? "My authority." Giovanni's voice was devoid of emotion. "If I am toppled, Antonio is in a position to assume command of the Chicago operations. He has been quietly gathering allies for months, pointing to my initial rejection of you 3 months ago as evidence of my instability. When I reversed my decision and married you, it only strengthened his argument that I act on impulse and emotion instead of logic. So he arranged for the Vitales to seize me. Not personally. He just made sure they had the intelligence and the chance they required. He wanted one of two outcomes. Either I would be unable to save you, which would prove I was weak, or I would have an extreme reaction to your kidnapping, which would prove I was emotionally unstable. Giovanni's hand tightened into a fist. Either result would have provided him the justification he needed to contest my leadership. The sheer depth of the deception was overwhelming. What will you do now? I will do what is necessary. He met my gaze. Antonio Russo will be handled permanently, and so will anyone else who was part of his planned takeover. By tomorrow evening, every disloyal person in my organization will be gone. The absolute resolve in his tone was a stark reminder of the man I had married. He was not just a husband, but a mafia don, a man who could command executions as easily as other people command a meal. Giovanni, please do not ask me to be merciful, Chiara. His voice was firm. These men tried to get you killed. They risked your life to further their own goals. I will not let that stand. I am not requesting mercy. I moved toward him, cupping his face with my hands. I am requesting that you handle this intelligently. If you get rid of everyone Antonio has spoken with, you will leave a void of power. Other families will interpret it as a sign of weakness, of paranoia. You will be confirming his claims that your emotions have compromised you. He attempted to turn away, but I held him in place. Hear me out. I agree, Antonio must be dealt with. And yes, the traitors must be punished. But you must do it with strategy, not with fury. Demonstrate to the families that you are in command, that you are making rational choices. Show them that loving me has not made you weak, but has made you stronger. How? The word came out rough. How do I punish the men who targeted my wife without appearing to be driven by emotion? By framing it as a matter of business, not a matter of vengeance. I let go of him. My mind was already exploring the options. Antonio wants your power because he claims you are unstable. So you must prove him wrong. Show the Council of Families the evidence of his betrayal. Let them see that he was ready to cooperate with the Vitales, who are our sworn enemies, all for his own advancement. That is not just a betrayal of you, it is a betrayal of the entire Cosa Nostra. Realization flickered in his eyes. Make it about devotion to the organization, not about you shielding me. Precisely. I walked to our wardrobe and began selecting my outfit. Arrange a meeting with all the powerful families, lay out your proof. Allow them to decide Antonio's punishment. In that way, his death is a group decision, not your personal, emotional response. And any of his other supporters will be too terrified to reveal themselves. Giovanni just observed me as I got dressed, a look of something like amazement on his face. When did you learn to think like a strategist? I have always been one. I caught his eye in the mirror. You simply failed to notice. Being ornamental does not mean being unintelligent, Giovanni. Your world is not so different from the one I grew up in. Everything revolves around image, partnerships, and knowing the right moment to act. I am sorry. The apology was soft but genuine, forever believing you were only a beautiful face, for failing to recognize your mind, your resilience, your ability to be my equal in ways that count. You see it now. I turned to look at him directly. That is what is important. Now, start making your calls. Organize the meeting, and let us eliminate this danger together. The council meeting took place 2 days later on neutral ground. It was a private estate used for Cosa Nostra affairs for many generations. Every significant family was in attendance, their bosses seated around a huge table that had been party to innumerable decisions. The room was filled with talk of deals, deception, and death. I sat next to Giovanni, the single woman among all these men. Some of the older members had complained about my attendance, but Giovanni was unyielding. He had told them, Chiara is my wife and my partner. She belongs here as much as any of you. If anyone objects, they can go, not a single person left. Antonio Russo was seated across from us, his face a perfect mask of neutrality. But I could see the gears turning in his mind, the way he studied each person at the table, searching for weaknesses and potential allies. Giovanni rose, and the room fell silent. He said, Gentlemen, I appreciate you coming. I called this meeting because there has been an act of treason inside our family. A low murmur spread through the room. Antonio's face remained unchanged. Giovanni's voice was steady and all business when he spoke again. 2 months ago, the Vitalis kidnapped my wife. We thought at the time it was just a random act of aggression, but our latest findings point to something far more sinister. The entire attack was made possible by someone in this room. He gave a nod to Marco Benedetto, who got up and passed a folder to each man. Inside this, you will find proof of communications between Antonio Russo and members of the Vitali family. It includes dates, times, and the full content of their talks. You will see how Russo gave them specific details on Caccini's security, our building plans, and my exact movements on the night they took my wife. Antonio's composure finally broke, and the color drained from his face. He stammered, "That proof is fake." "Is it?" Giovanni said, his voice sharp as glass. "Because we also have sworn statements from 3 of your own men who were in those planning meetings with you. They were wise enough to talk once they understood the real danger of your plan." All around the table, the men read through the files with growing alarm. The expressions on their faces turned grim. The proof was undeniable. There were messages, recorded calls, and bank records. It was everything required to confirm Antonio's guilt without a shadow of a doubt. Giovanni went on. "But the issue here is not just what Antonio did to my family. It is about what his betrayal means for all of us. He made a deal with our sworn enemies. He handed them information they could have turned against every single person here. He put his own ambition before the security of the Cosa Nostra." "That is not true," Antonio began to protest. "You wanted my chair?" Giovanni cut in, his tone freezing the air. "You told yourself I had grown soft because I fell in love with my wife. You saw my love as a weakness, something for you to use. But you made a critical mistake, Antonio. Loving Chiara is not my weakness. It is what makes me utterly merciless when I protect what belongs to me. And this organization, these families, and every man at this table belongs to me." He leaned in, placing his palms flat on the wood. "Antonio Russo betrayed all of us to get ahead. The only question left is what we are going to do about him." The decision was unanimous. Antonio's future was decided not by Giovanni's anger, but by the united verdict of the families he had wronged. He was stripped of his title, his fortune was taken, and he was given a death sentence. His execution was not revenge for what he did to me. It was a punishment for betraying the organization. I watched Giovanni during the entire process. I saw his perfect self-control and how he let the facts speak for themselves. He made the issue about loyalty, not his personal feelings. This was the man he was at his core. He could feel a deep love and also possess a chilling ruthlessness. He could keep his own emotions separate from what was strategically necessary. When everything was done and we were back at our home, Giovanni led me to his private study. "You were right about everything. If I had simply taken out Antonio in a rage, it would have started the very chaos he was hoping for. But by doing it this way, by making it about loyalty to our world, I showed everyone that I am still the one in charge." "We are in charge," I corrected him gently. "This is a team, do not forget." "A partnership," he said, saying the word as if he was trying it for the first time. I like the sound of that. He drew me toward him, his hands resting on my hips. "I love you, Chiara Caccini. I love you more than I ever believed I could love someone. I am sorry it has taken me this much time to see that loving you does not weaken me. It makes me invincible." "I love you too," I whispered, lifting my hands to hold his face. "Even when you are complicated and dangerous and sometimes so stubborn it makes me crazy." "Only sometimes," he teased. "Do not press your luck," I said, but I was smiling. He kissed me then. It was a deep kiss, one that staked a claim and was full of promises for our future. When we finally separated, he rested his forehead against mine. "I have a present for you." "What is it?" He walked to his desk, picked up another folder, and gave it to me. It was filled with official papers, property titles, business permits, and banking details. He said, "I have been putting this together for weeks. It is a charitable foundation in your name." It is financed with a portion of my legitimate companies. You will have total authority over how it runs and what it does. I just looked at the documents, feeling completely stunned. This is your freedom, he said with a small smile. You told me once you had a dream of being more than just a wife to someone. You wanted to be important for who you are, not for who you know. This is your opportunity. Create something that belongs only to you. Make an impact in ways that are separate from me and the Cosa Nostra. Be Chiara Caccini, not just the wife of Giovanni Caccini. My eyes started to fill with tears. Are you being serious? He said. Absolutely. I want you to be happy, Chiara. I want you to feel fulfilled. If giving you the tools to create your own empire, apart from mine, is what it takes, then that is what I will do. I put the folder on the table and went back into his arms. Thank you for seeing me, I said, for truly seeing who I am. How could I not see you? He asked, holding me tightly. You are the most incredible woman I have ever known. You are smart, you are strong, and you are brave enough to challenge me when I am wrong. I would be an idiot not to see that. You were an idiot, I reminded him, 3 months ago, and you still married me. He moved back just enough to look at me. Why did you? I mean it. Why did you give me another chance after all the pain I caused you? Because I looked past the fear and saw the man underneath. I lightly traced the line of his jaw. Because I knew that you were wounded in the same ways that I was. Because loving you felt like it was meant to be, even when it seemed impossible. I stopped for a moment, then smiled. And because I must enjoy being punished. He let out a real laugh, a sound that was open and honest. He said, That is lucky for me. Lucky for us both. I gave him a soft kiss. Now we can build this life together, the way we want. We are making something authentic from a situation that began with obligation and tactics. Something authentic, he repeated. I like that too. We just stood there in his study, holding each other, and watched the sun go down over the estate. This was our life now. It was complex and it was dangerous. It was built on a foundation that was not normal or simple, but it was ours, and because of that, it was perfect. 3 years later, I stood in the nursery of our home, rocking our little girl to sleep. Lucia was 6 months old. She had Giovanni's dark hair and my green eyes, and she had both of us wrapped around her small finger. Giovanni showed up at the door. He leaned on the frame with an expression he saved just for me and Lucia. It was open, gentle, and filled with love. Is she asleep? He whispered. Finally, I said. I carefully put Lucia in her crib and watched her settle with a quiet sigh. She really fought sleep tonight. She gets that stubbornness from you. He came up behind me and put his arms around my waist. His chin rested on my shoulder as we both watched our daughter dream. From me? He asked. You are the most stubborn person I have ever met. I was, he said, correcting me. I was the most stubborn. You have softened me. I let out a soft laugh. Is that what you call it? What would you call it? He asked. Redemption, I said. I turned around in his embrace to look at him. You became the man you were always supposed to be. You just needed to find the right person to help you see it. No, he said. He cupped my face, and his gaze was serious, even in the faint light of the nursery. It took meeting you. Specifically, you. Nobody else could have done what you did. You stood up to me. You questioned me, and you loved me even when I was not worthy of it. You rescued me, Chiara. You saved me from my father's shadow, from my own fears, and from a life where having power was the only goal. We rescued each other, I replied, placing my hand over his heart. You taught me that I could be strong. You showed me that being loved and being powerful could exist together. You proved that love could be fierce and protective, not suffocating. The best choice I ever made, he whispered, was to finally stop fighting myself and marry you. The second best choice, I corrected him with a smile. The best choice was letting me be your partner, not just your wife. Partners, he said, and kissed me gently. In all things, always. As we walked out of the nursery, his hand holding mine securely, I reflected on the path that led us to this moment. The rejection, the shame, the fear, the danger, and the choices that seemed impossible. Nothing about it was easy. It was nothing like the future I had imagined as a young girl thinking about her wedding. But when I looked at the life we had made, the foundation I managed that helped women get out of terrible situations, and the safety we had built for our daughter, I looked at the partnership we had created from the wreckage of our past mistakes. I would not want it any other way. Because Giovanni Caccini had taken me as his wife, and I had claimed him in return. I taught him that love was not a weakness. It was the most powerful force on earth. We were the living proof that even people who are deeply broken can find their way back to wholeness in each other's arms. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and inspiration to our audience.